I'd like to welcome you all to the Service Catalog Balanced Design webinar. Just a reminder, all attendees are muted for the duration of the event. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A panel to send them to the presenters. We will address all questions at the end of the event. Also, all participants today will receive an email from me with the slides, and later on this week you will receive the link to the recording. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and turn this over to Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen Systems.
Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Don Casson, as Stephanie said, CEO of Evergreen, and with me is Jeff Benedict, who heads up our ITSM practice and is a terrific solutions architect to boot. Let's take a look at our agenda for the day. Over the past year, we've run around 40 service catalog workshops across the U.S., and one of the most common high-volume, labor-intensive jobs IT has is providing software to its customers. This sort of explains the high level of interest we are seeing in the enterprise app store topic right now. The question we'll explore today is, can we build an experience that the customer will love, but can also help IT? We call this balanced design, and we want to share the principles that we use with you today in a way that you can use them in your planning and activities now. Beyond that, we'll briefly demonstrate our view of an enterprise app store built on ServiceNow, our vision of what that future can be, which is an integral part of a successful customer-centric service catalog. Then we'll answer some questions if you have any. Anytime during the webinar, you may submit a question using the Q&A function. I want to tell you just a little bit about Evergreen. Evergreen is a U.S.-based consulting firm, and we've worked with hundreds of mid-market and Fortune 1000 companies to improve their IT service management experiences. We are a full lifecycle firm, or in the words of one customer, you have both process and technology in one company. We are also one of the leading ServiceNow partners in the U.S. and have over a decade of domain experience in each area of the ServiceNow portfolio. I hope you don't mind me saying, so what? For the most part, ITSM has been done the same old way for the past decade: incident, problem, change, and a little knowledge. At the end of it, while we may be running a little better, so what? What about the customer? For the past 2 years at Evergreen, we've been working very hard to change this and focus from the customer in, not from IT out. Our inspirations have been Apple, Amazon, and Google, to name a few. We see both IT and the customer's experience evolving hand in hand, not as an afterthought. On the left side of this slide, you can see IT maturing, going from silos of IT activities to delivering IT services to being the engine behind delivery of any services. On the right side, the customer experience is evolving as well, from what we typically call not very good to being able to access a thoughtful and complete portfolio of services to being empowered by a true digital workspace driving their productivity and creativity. So how do we define a service? A service is an outcome that meets a customer's needs well enough to justify the purchase price. That's it. That's pretty simple, huh? So what is the purchase price? It's not just money. It's the total investment the customer has to make to get the service: time, energy, and money. It also considers ease of use, quality, complexity as the customer moves through the process, just like you do when you're the customer. For example, think about when you were trying to buy something online and the process was poor. Perhaps you were asked to go back and forth between screens and information you had already entered got dropped. You abandoned the shopping cart, right? But there is more than just the customer. Creating effective services rather than providing fragmented IT silo activities involves three constituencies: the customer, the providers, and the managers. All must be involved and have their needs met to create any truly viable service. Now, we recognize IT wants to deliver great services their customers will love, but they also want to reduce their own complexity, improve efficiency, accuracy, accountability, governance, and speed and quality of service. To achieve these goals, we follow an approach we call balanced design. If we begin by designing for the customer in a way that they love it and want to use it, we can also get what we want and have it driven by the customer's own self-service actions. Give the customer what they want to get, and we will get what we need. Let's look a little deeper at the three components: customer experience, execution effectiveness, and governance and accountability. When creating new end-to-end services, it's very easy to get lost in the activity, so you can't see the forest for the trees. This is where core, simple design principles can help you steer a true course, and these are what Evergreen uses when we work with our own customers. For the customer experience, what is most critical is this: always design from the customer in rather than IT out. This is the highest value principle because it is the Achilles heel of a service. If the customer won't use it, we're done. We studied the best, as we mentioned, and came up with 5 design principles here: simple, beautiful, complete, predictive, and leading. We've previously run a webinar just on these principles, which is available on our website if you'd like to see it, so we won't go further into these today. The second constituent is the providers. They are really just as critical to success as the customers, because if they don't encourage the use of the new way of doing things, it will fail. They will actually steer customers away from the new way. So let's look a little deeper at the principles here. First, we've got an 80-20 discipline for process reengineering automation, and that means good enough is good enough. Start simply and enhance as you get experience, and sync more closely with your customer. This does not mean you don't have to provide a high-quality experience end-to-end. You do have to do that. What we're fighting here is IT's natural sort of ingrained tendency to over-engineer solutions, creating unnecessary complexity, striving for 100%. It's kind of in our DNA. But we actually undermine the potential for success. So staying targeted at 80% and using that rule regularly and keeping it simple is good enough. The second one here is core services reusable building blocks. That means we'll build a core function once for all of us, not just one area, and then we will reuse it in a modular building block way. Without this approach, we will end up with hundreds of rifle shot kind of services which confuse the customer, create a high degree of unnecessary duplication, and eventually cause the solution to fail as customers abandon it. Standardizing offers and pricing. Following the thinking of reusable building blocks, we can also create high-quality solutions or happy meals that customers will be happy to use. Customers don't want to choose between hundreds of options. Customers want to be told what is best, given a small variety of offers or bundled offers, and then make it easy for them to buy. I stress this point because IT often fights this point. We're so used to providing a custom solution to every request because we feel like that's what we're doing for our customer, the best we can deliver for them, the best service we can offer, that it will somehow seem wrong if we don't. This is especially true when you look at creating bundled solutions and limiting prepackaged choices to 2 or 3. Last point here, do not make the customer do our work or wait for us to do our work. As we steer the customer based on who they are or the choices they make, we can limit or change what they see if we think ahead. For example, can we leverage information about their platform to only show them things that are relevant to them? How many approvals do you have for software purchases today, as an example? There may be 4 or 5 just because you haven't rationalized that process. This creates an unnecessary 2-week delay, and it makes it much more complex than it has to be. So at the highest level, we must re-engineer and simplify the work end-to-end for 2 big reasons. 1, if the experience isn't consistent, high quality end-to-end, the customer will reject it. You can't just make the front page pretty and then drop the ball. It makes customers even angrier. Imagine if you went to Amazon and the buying experience was beautiful for electronics, but horrible for running shoes. I know that sounds laughable, but if you think about the consistency of service delivery from the silos of IT, perhaps in your business, you probably just stop laughing. Point 2, if we go to the grassroots level with our providers and really simplify and improve how our work gets done, we will love it too. And we will lead the customers to a new way of doing business, thereby overcoming the biggest challenge, that of change resistance, together. This ballet between the customer and provider gets better and better as we work on it. By focusing on the customer and the services they want and need, we can also transform IT. The third constituent in end-to-end services is management. Without visibility into quality and accountability, we are flying blind. Only through effective management and insight into the services we're delivering can we sustain quality over time. Now, building manageability in at the time we design a service is the right time to do it. It is when we are truly in the synchronized moment with the needs of the customer and the provider, when we best understand what the service end-to-end intends to deliver, and so we can also most easily and correctly design the controls that enable us to deliver the service with high quality and consistency over time. That's as deep as we'll go on this topic, this manageability topic today. It may be a good one for a future webinar. So, now that we've reviewed the principles of balanced design, and they seem pretty simple, but we do use them every day, let's take a look at these principles applied to a business solution for an enterprise app store. At the highest level, this is a really simple solution. You shop, buy, install, and enjoy. Specifically, step by step, we're going to look at the interaction between the customer and the provider. We're going to leave the role and interplay of management, as I mentioned, for a later date. So we start with shop. We begin where the customer enters the app store. It's a beautiful, simple environment where they're able to easily search for applications they might need, read descriptions, other users' reviews, and cost data to help them choose what's best for them. Once they decide, they can place it in their shopping cart. On the IT side, IT has no interaction unless there is an issue or the customer needs something not found here, because all of IT's work is automated by the self-service choices of the customer. Compare this to today, which may be the case for you, where for most there is time spent explaining what is available, helping the customer understand what is best for them, then manually filling out and placing an order. On checking out, the customer can enter their PO or charge code information and get automated approval right away if the purchase is a pre-approved software item, which many are or should be. If approvals are needed, the customer can clearly see what process will be followed. Unless there's an issue, again, IT has no involvement. For pre-approved software, the workflow handles it automatically. For software requiring approvals, the workflow routes the request automatically. Once approved, the financial system is updated, charging the correct cost code based on the information the user or the customer gave us. Software asset management is also automatically updated. For many organizations, this eliminates weeks of delay and manual interaction handling, sometimes onerous approval and financial allocation process. The customer now can select how they want to get their software. If their PC is managed with SCCM, they will see that they can self-install with a single button push. If not, they can opt to follow a link to a site and download the software, also pretty quick. Beyond that, if they want the actual media, they can request it to be shipped or they can pick it up, at least in the example that we're talking about here today. Once again, IT doesn't have to do anything unless they are manually providing the media. The integration with SCCM automates the deployment to a managed desktop, or the customer downloads the software themselves. All is possible in all these examples by actively using the principles of balanced design. So, we give the customer what they want to get what we need. Does it work? Well, we have one customer who supports 150,000 employees, offering around 200 software titles with a staff of 3. And they're not terribly busy. Beyond that, their customers do love the self-service solution, so it seems like it can work as a win-win. There are also some key strategic values you can get in Enterprise App Store, and I'll hit them at a high level. If we can get our customers to want to use our portal for what they need and want, they will go less outside of IT, enabling us to better support and secure them. This allows us to begin building a tighter, better relationship with the customers as we work more closely together, bringing them a high-quality, customer-centric experience. By having good product data and cost at their fingertips, customers will make better purchase trade-off decisions. This is pretty well proven. Even if the customer isn't actually charged for the purchase, it changes the buying behavior. Offering fewer choices and giving the customer user scoring data to help them choose the best product for their needs will naturally simplify the software portfolio over time, eventually making IT support mission easier. We will also have a wealth of buyer preference information automatically based on their self-service actions. This will give us much to work with as we improve and expand our services. So that's all I have to cover on balanced design today and its application in an app store. I hope it has been useful for you. I will now turn it over to Jeff to share what we have been building in an enterprise application store.
Thanks, Don. Let me share my desktop here. We first start with a couple slides just to kind of cover the foundation or a few notables on our particular solution before kind of diving into the demo. So the solution was built entirely on the ServiceNow framework, and we're using kind of native UI pages, UI macros to present these kind of store-specific kind of presentations. So I note this because the components themselves can be adapted to your specific needs. Further, it was set up to kind of handle either a native service catalog-based experience or can be embedded as part of a content management system portal if you have one. And I'll show you kind of both perspectives here in a minute. We're also including some sample software titles that can serve as templates or may even match your specific software titles to kind of help that speed of populating the store. Also, the solution was created, with a toolkit kind of approach in mind. So a lot of the components are, things like workflow activities that can be utilized both within our software store-based use case and workflows, but also outside of that. Last point on this slide, this is also built on Eureka and is currently being tested for backwards compatibility on Dublin, though I also expect this will work with Calgary and Berlin versions as well. So a little overview of what you'll find in kind of our store solution, and I'll demo each of these aspects, but I wanted to give you a little background kind of before showing them. So one, we've created kind of a shopping experience where you can browse, filter, rate software titles, kind of using a modern UI kind of perspective. As Don indicated, software oftentimes requires some sort of payment or chargeback kind of mechanism. So we have some payment methods that we leverage to be kind of linked and associated to these software items that kind of drive that part of the workflow. The same thing with distribution methods, and we've set these up in a modular way so that you can kind of attach different distribution methods to different software items. And the ones that we've kind of packaged in here are kind of software push via SCCM, download, shipment, and kind of pick up from a central location. The order and fulfillment process is coupled with the software asset management application of ServiceNow to kind of register entitlements, if necessary, create software assets, and also provide mechanisms where you can manage kind of that software inventory and drive a software compliance activity. Kind of last pillar here, integrations have been established with SCCM as well as web service-based integration models that are used to kind of set up how you would integrate with a financial system to drive either a chargeback validation or some other posting of billing transactions to that financial system. Let me shift gears here now, and we'll show you what we've got. So first of all, when you load the update set, what we'll find is that there's a new application kind of created out here for Software Store. And some of the options that are available, notice that we're also kind of showing you what are the specific development components that went into building this. But there's an option to configure the store, and there's settings in here for being able to put it into a maintenance mode to make changes without impact to the users. Some debug messaging modes for admins. Notice there's some options to turn on and off the use of ratings. Also, I mentioned the legacy catalog or the kind of native catalog experience, and I'll show the difference between that. And there's an on-off switch for that, as well as what is the overall category that we should interrogate and flag items to be considered software shopping kind of items. Also included here, there is a wizard or a UI page created specifically for authoring these new software titles in the store. We can pick from our list of software-based categories, describe specifications, descriptions, even get into the how is this software licensed and do we have current license rights, and kind of link it to our defined payment methods or distribution methods. And then kind of behind this page, it'll go out and create the links and ties and the appropriate records so that it can display and just be distributed kind of fully. So as I mentioned, we also are including, sample items in the catalog. So there's 166 software titles in here that range from Adobe software to Microsoft to varieties, even some freeware kind of software out here. And again, these are really to serve as kind of a template as well as a model to kind of build other software items that are out there. And some of these may match your existing software that you would want to present and make available to your customers. And as such would, serve as a boilerplate to kind of get started. All right, so let's jump into kind of the perspective. So one thing, normally when you go to browse categories in this native or legacy catalog experience, the way it works, so like if I click on department services, it kind of lists these items. But when we enable that legacy software or legacy catalog option in the configuration, as soon as I go into the software category, what's going to happen is instead it's going to present with our own kind of experience. And in our experience, we're kind of allowing the users to do some additional filtering of the software. So I can search for things that, match a certain name. I can also look for, by manufacturer or by kind of category. And further, I can also, if I turn on my star ratings or use ratings option, I can kind of filter by ratings that have been established to date to find my particular software items. As I mentioned, this is kind of through the native UI. You can also get the experience through kind of a content management system portal. And we provide some example here as how this could be embedded. Obviously, very similar experience, and this could be configured and tweaked further. But in essence, being able to embed the same software shopping experience through your overall portal. And to give you another perspective of this, there's one that we have that's kind of a demo portal. When I do the get software, you'll notice that similar browse of titles, similar way to search, though obviously applying different styles to some of the color schemes and buttons and the layouts to some degree. Again, this could be taken further based off of your need to present this kind of within the same kind of experience that they have in the portal. All right, so let's, I guess before I go to the way the ratings work, so notice I do have some options here to kind of view the ratings, see what my ratings are. From this list, I can also do and rate the software directly from the list if I want to. I can also go and see the history of ratings that have been taken to date and the comments that have been made to see kind of how it accumulated that particular average score to date. All right, so let's order one of these items and we'll go through the process. So I'm going to go through and do, let me just go choose this guy. So now the other things you'll find here, so notice we can see the ratings information up at the top in our browser, or in our kind of cart area. We can also see what are the different ways in which this particular item has been set up for delivery. And again, I'll show you further as we go through this, the actual what delivery options are available for it are based off of the definition of the item and what delivery options you want to make available for this particular software. Other things you'll note on the screen, if the technical specifications are defined on the item, they show up in kind of an open and collapse kind of section. And this is really just to kind of save real estate, but give the user, some insight into what their environment must entail or be, kind of compatible with in order for the software to work and work successfully. There is an option here to change who the request is for, though it'll default to me based off of myself being logged into the actual environment. And then the payment methods. So we have two payment methods kind of associated with this catalog item. One, I can either pay for this through a purchase order or I can pay through a chargeback. If I choose purchase order, I'm prompted for a purchase order number. Now, as part of my settings, I can say this is my default purchase order number. So this kind of saves me some time in filling these things out. So I've already set, as part of my preferences, this is my default purchase order number that I use for my purchases. So it's filling that in for me. Obviously, I can change it. I can always go back and change the chargeback as well. In this case, I have options to charge this to one or more cost centers, so I can spread this out across multiple cost centers. And I'm going to, let's just do 40, 60. And if I try to add this to cart, what's going to happen is it's actually going to validate my kind of chargeback information against our financial institution. So what just happened here is it actually reached out through web services connected to our financial system and came back with a test of whether or not the two cost centers I specified are indeed valid, and came back and told me that one of my cost centers has subsequently been replaced by another cost center, so therefore is not valid. So it was kind of wanting me to change this to something else. And also notice if I were to kind of choose something that doesn't total 100% and try to order this, I'm also going to get a validation error there as well. All right, so let's set this to 100%. So the other thing that happens on this page that get to the kind of the distribution method. So by default, because of who I am and my primary computer is this computer down here called EVG user 003, that it's basically, it's determined that this computer is managed by SCCM and determined that SCCM is the most optimal way to push this software to me. So it's basically suggested that I should do a software push for this software because that would be preferred. I can always choose to do a download or some other method, but in this case it's kind of defaulting based off of who my computer is. Now if I change this to somebody else, for example, change this to Annie, you'll notice that it changed the primary computer that this software would be distributed to Annie's primary computer, which is not managed by SCCM, and therefore threw a validation error that says this computer is not managed, and therefore we can't do a software push directly to this computer. And so it's prompting me to choose a different method, and if I try to order now, it's going to still kind of say I need to choose some other method. So let me flip this back to me, and we'll order this as is. All right. So again, validates my cost information again. All is happy, hunky-dory, and we move on. So our stages kind of align with what Don had indicated before. We've got a kind of an authorization step in here to authorize the purchase of this particular software and the distribution of this software, and then we get into deployment and ultimately, complete. Let's dig into the workflow, and I'll show you kind of how this thing works. So there's one primary workflow. And the way this thing moves is it's based off of what payment and distribution method I selected. So based off the payment method, it actually kicks off a specific workflow defined for that payment method, and the same applies for distribution methods. So let me show you those records to kind of complete this picture. So the payment methods defined look like this. And in the chargeback payment method, I've got really three workflows defined on them. One, a validation workflow, which if I look at that, has actually been already run for us as part of that order now, add to cart activity, where it went out and connected to a web service, got back a response, and returned that response back to my client that was either success or failure as far as the information that I entered on the form. The other workflows that are defined on the payment method are whatever authorizations needed for this particular payment method, which is kind of the one that's running right now, and then ultimately on the back end of this process, or the back end of this workflow, are there any other additional workflows we want to run on the back end to update the financials, post transactions to our financial institutions, et cetera, to kind of complete the post-delivery accounting of the particular software. So it's all defined kind of at these payment records or payment method definition records. So let me go back to my request and so this particular one, if I were to look at this workflow, it needs approval from the cost center managers in order for this to be able to move forward. So I'm going to go forward to my request and approve it just to kind of move it to the next step. So I'm going to approve this request. And if I refresh here, what you'll find is now my payment authorization-based sub-workflow has been approved. We've now moved to the delivery or the distribution-based workflow, which in this case I chose software push. So it's kicking off a workflow specifically to add my computer to, or add that software to my computer via SCCM. And the same thing exists here is we have the distribution methods. And if I look at, say, software push as an example, what's defined here are some logic or some scripting related to whether or not my computer is eligible for this particular distribution method. And two, what is the overall workflow to kick off when I want to fulfill this delivery via software push. So the same applies for download, ship, and pickup software. We all have individual workflows for those particular types of delivery methods. So let me kind of go one other path here. Let me show you the download route. I'll just order the same software. We'll choose, so I'll just do purchase order just to mix it up a little bit, and we'll do download just to go a different path. Same stages. So my workflow on this, same overall workflow, oops. Though for the way this is set up, the actual purchase or purchase order-based payment method doesn't have a workflow defined for authorization, so it basically moves right past that, straight to distribution. And the way the software download distribution kind of method works is on the actual software definition records. So if I go to my item, if I choose download from repository, I'm also prompted for a software download definition record. And what's contained in here are the groups and or roles that I would need to be a member of in order to see the download information and be able to access the actual software downloads. And so what's happening as far as this workflow is it's using those group memberships to go out, in this case, reach out to Active Directory and add me to those various groups, and then ultimately send me an email with, here's my particular software to be downloaded and a link to where I can download that particular software. So let me see if I've gotten my email yet. So it looks like my request has been fulfilled. Let me just refresh here. It's all the way through. Give me a second for my emails to catch up. There's really two emails that will come in at the end here, assuming I can get there. I guess while I'm waiting for that, let me show you one other thing that happens. So on the back end of this process, I mentioned there's a payment workflow. So one thing that happens on the back end is we will log billing entries. So for every kind of cost center that is entered and validated, it'll log a billing entry that will say, here's the amount or the calculated amount based off of this request. And then it'll reach out to the financial institution and actually push this billing transaction to that institution. And ultimately, if it receives that successfully, it will mark this as processed and kind of record what is the financial institution's kind of reference for this particular billing entry. So kind of closing that loop. The other thing that's happening on the back end of this is if the software itself is licensable software, then it will, let me show you, created today, it will register an entitlement between who the requested for individual is in that particular software. So if I look at my Adobe Systems Effects Professional software, so here is my license that I have out here that I own 10 rights for. But because I've been authorized and now software has been distributed to me, I've now also been registered as an entitled user for this particular software, which can then be useful in understanding should I actually have rights to use this particular software. And indeed I should based off of being authorized through this particular process. I'm not getting my software download link, but in any which way, that kind of completes what I hope to show. I guess let me show one more thing before I close it out here. So we'll go to Software Store. The other way, or the other aspect of this is we are actually getting software installation records kind of imported in from SCCM. So if we get a software definition record that has already been kind of set up for ready for distribution through SCCM, they get loaded into the system, and from here we can turn these into these catalog items through that same wizard. So I come through here and it's going to kind of take some of the information that we know about that software. I can come in and define, well, it is licensable software, it does cost us certain things, and since it was this actual definition of the software was sourced from SCCM, it's already defaulted the distribution method to software push. So we know it's already eligible for being pushed through SCCM. Here's my download link, which if I hadn't been provisioned properly to those groups and/or the roles, then when I would come to this page, I'd basically be kind of told that I don't have access to download this particular software. But since my provisioning activity added me to those groups and/or roles that are defined for me to have access to see this software, and I'm taken to a page where I can actually download either the Mac version or the PC version of this particular software, and that's really just depending on how the software is packaged and what options are available. So that's kind of what I hope to cover today. I hope that was useful and help you understand kind of what we built and kind of how you can probably leverage this for your own environments.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Hold on a second here. All right, can everyone see that slide? So possible next steps, if you found this at all interesting and wonder, what might be a logical next step, here are a couple of options. If you have an interest in the Enterprise App Store or our advanced version of Service Catalog solution, both being built on ServiceNow, perhaps you would like a deeper dive demo for you and your team, that's certainly an option. As an additional incentive around the Enterprise App Store, we have offering a slight discount, 15% on the installed price of the App Store for any purchases by year end. It's not a lot, but it's a little something. Many looking to improve their customer experience today in their Service Catalog and CMS began with the re-engineering of the look and functionality of that CMS. Evergreen offers some beautiful options that are more than just skin-deep rebranding in that area, if you're interested in that. Last but not least, perhaps you're considering a broader Service Catalog initiative at an enterprise level, but you aren't sure where to start or how to get your team on the same page. We offer a one-day private Service Catalog workshop on your site, which educates your team, uncovers key business drivers, and then creates a logical roadmap for going forward. You can literally save months of effort in consensus building and get your program moving faster. Best of all, it's only $3,950, which pretty much covers the cost of travel. So I think that's all we've got to present today, and we'd like to now field questions that you guys have submitted here.
Okay, great. I do have a question. Jeff, this is for you. From Melissa, can you provide some insight into using the CMS and ServiceNow for design? And do you have any examples of designs Evergreen has put together, overview of that functional process in the CMS?
So the CMS, meaning I'm assuming the content management system or the self-service portal part, yeah, we have done quite a bit of projects in that environment, and we can certainly follow up with Alyssa with providing her some samples of some of the sites we've created in the past. Our goal is really ultimately to create, a customer experience that matches your customer's needs and your kind of culture and environment. Obviously, as part of that, we can leverage a lot of our existing kind of templates or sites we've created in the past as kind of a way to kind of kickstart that activity. That ultimately the goal is trying to deliver, something that matches, that customer's needs and, kind of overall drives the customer experience to be improved for your specific customers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, I've got a question from George, and I think what he's asking is, what is the link between the software list in the software store and in ServiceNow? Is that in the product catalog? So he wrote software list using the product catalog in ServiceNow, ? And he didn't clarify that for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure, what he might be looking for, but I will mention that, so our kind of the titles that we're including in the update set, and 166 of them, as I showed you, they're catalog items. They're also kind of software models. So, and the reason for doing that is the software model part of it kind of defines what the manufacturer is for the software, but also kind of defines whether it's licensable software or not, and also then is the software model becomes what is ultimately used in the software asset management application to link to assets, what rights we own, as well as compare those rights you own with installations found in the environment.
Okay, great. I have another question. Can the end user make these requests via their mobile device?
the answer would be yes, though probably the best experience. So I will say that the actual software store, application store components is using what's called responsive, kind of a responsive web framework. So in essence, it's set up to where it'll display differently on different screen resolutions, i.e. Mobile phones versus tablets. You know, the best way to provide that complete experience would be to kind of embed the software store as part of a content management site, self-service portal that's also responsively, you know, architected, designed so that the overall experience, you know, is match or works best, you know, it works on a mobile phone as well as a browser as well as a tablet. And that's, you know, a principle we follow in a lot of our portal design is to make sure that it does kind of meet kind of a mobile experience in addition to a standard laptop, desktop, browser-based experience.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Another question, does the application store work with multiple SCCM environments?
So I assume meaning multiple SCCM servers, and the answer would be yes. So part of the data we read in from SCCM, we track which SCCM server it came from, and as part of that validation of is this computer eligible to be installed, or this software eligible to be installed on this computer has to match that it came from the same SCCM server in order to be able to deliver it to it. So in essence, one SCCM server can only you know, push software that's defined in that SCCM server to computers that are managed within that environment. But we are tracking where it came from in order to be able to drive that kind of that linkage or that assurance that it will indeed be able to push to that machine.
Okay, let's see. How do we handle software push or other application store distribution if we do not have computer information within our ServiceNow environment?
Yeah, so to, you know, kind of to ease the burden on the consumer, we did kind of set this up kind of where, you know, we're expecting computer records to exist in ServiceNow and ideally be associated to the actual end users themselves that are shopping. But if that kind of setup doesn't exist, if you don't have computer records or your users' linkages to computers isn't set up, then, you know, it really just becomes a matter of changing the way the kind of user is prompted when they're ordering their particular software to kind of ask them for either their computer information or whatever relevant attributes are needed in order to, you know, kind of drive those distribution methods. Whether, you know, in software push may be a challenge given the fact that they'd have to pick a, you know, a computer that was ultimately we can assure had come from an SCCM or other software distribution tool.
Okay, going back to another question about SCCM, does this only work with SCCM? What about Altiris LandDesk or others?
So at this time, you know, we kind of packaged the integration for SCCM. You know, this seems to be, for most of the customers we're talking to, the most prevalent. We'll say our plan is to continue to extend this solution to kind of work with other device management tools that are commonly in use. You know, if you have one of these, you know, we can absolutely kind of quote creating that integration for you and kind of help you along those paths. But at this point, it's not part of our package.
Okay, and let's see, I think this is our last one unless I get some more in. This seems to be PC-centric. Are you planning to support apps for mobiles and tablets in the future?
So the answer would be yes. You know, to be effective as a kind of one-stop enterprise app store, you know, we must support apps across all kind of devices that use in the enterprise. You know, proliferation of portals, you know, is a rising problem in many organizations that you know, will make it easier for customers. You know, it will not make it easier for customers to make this successful. So it is our plan to kind of extend this beyond the PC-based software.
Hey, Jeff, I did get a few more questions, and Steve wants to know if you need orchestration to implement this. So
for the SCCM push, at this point, the answer is it doesn't appear that we do. We're using, some plugins and things to do some of the PowerShell scripting into SCCM that doesn't necessitate the orchestration. One part of the demo I showed kind of had my software download workflow was actually adding users to Active Directory groups. That is a specific orchestration kind of activity. So if you don't own orchestration, and we do need to do some provisioning of add users to Active Directory groups in order to do things like access downloadable software, and we have to look at alternative methods. I will say one of our customers that Don alluded to that we kind of initially built some of this stuff for, they do Active Directory-based group provisioning without orchestration, without an orchestration license, and a lot of that is done through some web services, kind of wrappers around Active Directory that we interface with from ServiceNow.
Okay, and another question, can ServiceNow work with another asset management system like Remedy?
So, I think the answer would be yes. You would obviously add another integration point. The idea, I think there's probably a couple integration points would be there. One is I think we'd want the assets, i.e. computers or devices that software would be installed on to be, fed into ServiceNow so that could be part of the pick list on the kind of order process, right? So we pick what computer device the software is going to. And then on the back end, there'd have to be some push back to, say, Remedy or the other asset management system of kind of the entitlement registration or the update to rights and use kind of aspects of that.
Okay, Jeff, I think you're off the hook for a minute. I think this one's for Don. Is the App Store a one-time fee or a subscription? Is training and transition provided as part of the initial cost so that further customization is available?
Thank you. Today, the App Store is purchased as a one-time purchase. It's not a subscription license, and you get all that we have with it, and the price that you saw includes the installation of it. So it's turnkey. In the future, it may become a subscription service as ServiceNow brings out its marketplace, which they're planning to do next year, and you can then buy add-ons to things you're doing, that sort of thing. But today, it's available that way, and there would be a pretty minimal annual maintenance fee around providing the integrations and upgrades to make sure that whatever we've tied it to continues to work properly. As far as training and transition provided, yes, it is, and further customization is available, so you can do that yourselves, or you can have us do it if you want.
Okay, I think we're through all the questions. Just a reminder, if you came in late, I will be sending an email out with a link to download the slides, and I should have the link to the recording out to you no later than Friday. So again, you will get the slides and a recording of the event. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, feel free to respond to the email that you received from me, and I thank you again for your participation. We look forward to having you on the future webinar. Thank you.